We're here. Excellent. Okay. Welcome to our tongue tie experts video series on, we're bringing you experts from the field of oral restrictions, tongue tie, lip tie, buccal ties. And today we are very proud and excited to have with us Effath Yasmin from India, all the way across the globe. So we're spanning from New York to India. Welcome, Yasmin. It's great to
Hi.
have you here.
Hi,
Hi.
Lisa. Thank you so much for inviting me and having an interview across the globe. I'm very excited to meet you again.
Hi, me too. And the last time Yasmin and I were together, we were in Canada for our international conference on tongue tie, the association called ICAP that Yasmin was so involved in. She's one of the board of directors. She put on a great conference. It was an exciting and an event that really helped the field move forward. And, you know, I want to thank you publicly for that, Yasmin. In the meantime, I'm just going to read. I have to read because her description is so amazing, all the things that she does. So I'm going to read this so I don't miss anything, all about Yasmin. Okay. So Effath Yasmin is a filmmaker, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. She's an IBCLC and a biodynamic craniosacral therapist. Her special interests lie in infant oral and sucking dysfunction, tongue tie assessment, treatment, and rehabilitation. Being a visionary, Yasmin also spearheaded a professional support forum for oral ankylofrenula, the most revered as an international knowledge sharing network among multidisciplinary health professionals globally. Her work has been published in the International Journal of Laser Dentistry and in a textbook of laser dentistry, and currently she is pursuing self-funded research assignments on the subject of tongue tie and on various facets of impacts of ties on breastfeeding. She continues to tirelessly work on her seminal work on the link between tongue ties and depression. Yasmin serves on several national and international boards and committees, Birth India, an NGO striving and co-founding director of International Consortium of Oral Ankylofrenula Professionals, which is the ICAP. She also writes extensively on lactation, tongue tie, parenting, and craniosacral biodynamic therapy. So that's quite a mouthful, but I know them all to be true, and we've met through our association with those groups, the ICAP group and the group on the multidisciplinary group, right, that brings us all together. And I just want to say thank you for the work you do, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
So one of your chief missions, I know, is the film, right? So do you want to tell me a little bit about your film? And before we actually have a little clip we'll play, but let's hear about your film, Untying Breastfeeding, from you, because it's amazing.
Okay, so this film, it was a way to get an intent to open this topic up at a very large level globally, Lisa. Mm-hmm. And because in the field, like you might know, because we are all professionals working in this field, there's a huge amount of resistance to information, the right kind of information. And amongst the medical fraternity, it's not a topic that people even want to talk about, because they say we don't believe in tongue ties, for example. Mm-hmm. Or there are other issues around tongue ties that have to be that have to be discussed. Mm-hmm. You know, explored, and we need to brainstorm. We have a lot we need to actually research upon. So these are some of the intentional pursuit that made me want to break those barriers through storytelling, Lisa. Mm-hmm. And I thought the only way we can meet on a common ground is to have stories being told, because once it is non-verbal and it becomes a space where we can experience human experiences, I think it becomes a lot more easier to discuss things. And it's not always possible when we do a cognitive discussion and we can just be blocked out and we don't want to discuss anything further about the subject. And storytelling has a very powerful tool to be able to transcend languages, boundaries, and pretty much our own perspectives that can sometimes block our thinking.
Mhm.
So that's the intent behind the film, Lisa.
Yes, and I agree with you, and I think that part of the impact is because it's not just about facts, and sometimes we have to get the facts out of the way and just have the heart of the matter there, you know, get the feelings and the stories, as you say, and the film does a wonderful job of doing that and opening up the discussions that have to be there without just preaching and teaching and you know, learning about the technicalities of everything. There's so much more to this field than the technical aspects, as we both know and see in our practices every day, right? So you do have a practice where you see women, you see families in
Yes.
your
Yeah,
locality, right?
in
Yeah.
Mumbai, I had a clinic in my home for a very long time, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
I recently moved about a year outside of home, especially because I wanted a larger space. I wanted families to feel comfortable because it's a space where people bring in so much back from their experiences outside, either from their home setup or just meeting constant doctor over doctor. They carry a lot of grief. They carry a lot of frustration because there's not much information in terms of supporting breastfeeding. So I wanted to create a space where they would feel they have a space to let themselves become a part of their experience, wanting to bring together their birth, mostly the birth. The
Mm-hmm.
experience of birth has not been pretty much supported for most of these moms, especially
Right.
the ones who come in my clinic. And it's a high risk clinic. And it's not a regular clinic where I would see regular cases. So most of them have severe feeding issues. So they carry more than just the feeding. They have their emotions, they have their grief, they have their frustrations, they have their anger, they have a lack of information. So all of this is something that needs sometimes space. And I've just been grateful to have the space created for them. And it was through visualization that I was able to bring that into reality. And I would love to invite you, Lisa, one day to come over to Mumbai to have a look at the clinic.
I absolutely would love that. I hear in your talking about it that it's a special place where you're holding space for women, which
Yes.
and talking about birth, you know, I'm a midwife, right? So that's, you know, you're speaking my language about how much birth affects the woman herself, the breastfeeding. It's just, you can't separate that.
Yeah.
Before we go on, I just wanted, you know, I see there's quite a few people watching. I just want to say hi to everyone. And please feel free to post questions in the chat, you know, in the underneath the video here, and we'll try to get to your questions as we're chatting. And if we can't answer everything while we're on, we will definitely go back because we have lots to talk about. So I'm just going to read a little bit of a synopsis about the film, and then we will, I'll show the clip so that we can have more of a discussion and more questions I'm sure will come up because it's pretty intense. Okay, so Untying Breastfeeding is a 59-minute documentary investigating the narrative of the mothers who navigate through significant breastfeeding challenges due to the congenital birth anomaly and trace the arduous process encountering medical professionals who often have a dismissive, denigrative, or prescriptive approach. The narrative is juxtaposed with 17 experts from across the world who share the latest understanding about various factors about the apathetic factors and events around birth and breastfeeding. These factors and events potentially have lifelong implications for the health of humankind. And that, you know, an outsider hearing those words, Yasmin, may feel like we're exaggerating. But I think the more you learn about this, at least personally, the more I learn about this topic and the deeper I dive into all the associated topics with it and the effects on families, the more I know it to be true. I mean, this changes lives, you know.
Yes, it
Yeah,
does, Lisa. And
yeah,
it's
so
true that
powerful.
I'm also feeling that most of the families who have been experiencing, anything that is impacting out of ankylosing, for example, tongue ties, and other implications that come around how birth has been supported, essentially, a lot of them find this to be so true to their life. And it could be true that the people who are not anywhere close to these experiences might find it to be a bit of exaggeration. But the moment they get in touch with any family who have gone through this as an experience, for them it's been a life-changing, life-altering experience to have to find an answer, just find an answer, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let me see. Bear with me for one moment as I share my screen so we can get the, 1 second, a little bit of technical stuff going on. Okay, should come up here. Of course, everything always works when you're practicing, right?
In 2016.
Okay, wait. Let me see if this works.
5.6 million child deaths in 2016. In 2000.
I'm trying to start it from the beginning in full screen. Okay. Here we go. Okay, we got it. Let me rewind it to the beginning, and here we go. Sorry about that.
In 2016, 5.6 million child deaths under the age of 5 were recorded, and a staggering 46% were in the first month of life.
One of the greatest contributors to babies dying before the age of 1 in much of the developing world is got to be the lack of breastfeeding.
There is literally zero knowledge about breastfeeding.
So all I knew is that my baby was supposed to be just latching on and feeding and happiness, and that was not happening.
We were looking for him, but we didn't quite know where to look for him.
We've said pregnancy and birth are all these terribly, highly technical medical events. Now suddenly being a mother is supposed to be natural.
We don't yet live in a breastfeeding culture. I'm doing my best and it's not good enough, and I'm not good enough.
I still remember that night. I just couldn't have a closure on this.
Tongue tie, or ankylosing, is a congenital condition that has been linked to significant breastfeeding challenges. Recent ultrasound studies have shown us that the restrictions caused by a tongue tie can impede breastfeeding.
We found that 10.7% of babies had a tongue tie, and the incidence has been controversial.
And there's a whole host of potential biomechanical things that we don't even know about yet.
And this ambiguity makes things even more difficult for mothers.
That tongue that you're really stressing can interfere with so many different bodily functions.
Beginning with breastfeeding at infancy.
We have so many grow-up patients coming to our office.
I think mothers that have a really difficult time with breastfeeding and don't reach their goals and haven't been supported are allowed to be angry.
Like, that's how you feel. Like, I'm broken. I can't do the most basic thing on the earth, which is feeding my baby.
Leaves me speechless. It's beautiful. And when I was at the screening this summer, and we had a room full of professionals, right? And when it was over, I think everybody was as speechless as I feel right now. Just a big sigh, and so sad what women go through, right? And just to feed their babies. So sad. But I'm so moved by the fact that you were able to make this film, and that people will get this message and be moved by it and move to action. That's the ultimate goal, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So as I said, if you have any questions, please feel free. I'm just checking Facebook to see where the comments have been. We got a couple of people watching. This is it's a hard time, right? Because we are all at different time zones here, and we're in New York where it's the morning, and where you are it's the nighttime, and we've got everything in between watching us. Okay, so we have a few questions that are, you know, that come up for me, and a few questions that have been asked, and we've already talked about, you know, your purpose of the film, but why a film and not a book or something else? Why did you feel that a documentary was necessary?
I think it was important because, Lisa, like I mentioned to you, storytelling is a very strong, very powerful medium through which we can transcend boundaries and languages. And I think that was the critical point of why it turned out to be a film, especially because I'm not a filmmaker by profession. And it was hard for me to even know how this is even going to manifest or how is it going to even happen. And at the time that I thought about the film, it was almost 8 to 9 years ago, Lisa. It was a long time ago. And it took its time because I needed a team who can work and make this, you know, the vision come to reality. And through this process, in the last 2 years, I think it was critically, more importantly, actively we worked towards making it happen. And there was a team that came together naturally across the globe, because I had about 21 camera people and the cinematographers actually working across the globe for me in different places. So it was a humongous, massive project that I undertook, which I did not know that I was getting into. And if you ask me if I knew all of this work is going to go into it, I don't know if I would have ever had the courage to take that first step. And sometimes I think getting into an unknown pathway with not having a clear vision, in the sense of no clarity, is also a good way to just move ahead, I guess.
It seems like you had a mission and you just followed it.
Yes,
and you didn't know exactly what you needed to know, but you knew you had to do it.
You just had to do it, and there was no choice, Lisa. I wasn't doing something for myself. It was something that was driven, and I had to do it, and I was just chosen. That's what I felt, and I felt grateful about it. But you know what? I was so fascinatingly touched when I went to ICAP. I met Richard, Dr. Richard, Richard, and he had come up with a book on tongue ties. And I think you have written a part of the book. Did you do a chapter?
No, I'm not in the book. No.
No, not in that book. Okay. Yeah. All right. So that is that's a book that I didn't know about. Okay. And I met him only on ICAP during the time. And it was so incredible coincidence that there was a book and a film on the same subject, and we're dealing with the vastness about the subject at the same forum. And it meant to me that this was driven by the universe, and it needed to happen, and we were just chosen. That's all I felt. And if anybody hasn't read that book, I would really call in more people to read that book. It's a fascinating book about the subject, and it really covers a large majority of the subjects that I've tried to deal with. Only thing is that we were not connected during the filmmaking process. I wasn't connected. It's an independent.
I was going to say it's validating for, I'm sure, for both of you. And then on my own work, my work has been my parents' guide to TOTS, TOTS meaning tethered oral tissue. And I have a course for parents. And what I've found is, after reading Dr. Baxter's book and after seeing your film, I realized that we're all saying the same thing in different ways and coming from different directions, but without speaking to each other. As you say, it's the same basic information, the same paradigm that we're trying to promote. You know, especially, you know, there are some providers that are just dealing with the technical aspects of how to release that one piece of tissue under the tongue, and we all know it's so much more than that. And that's why, that's what I liked about Dr. Baxter's book also, because it wasn't just about, it's not just for dentists. It's not just for lactation consultants. It's not just for body workers. it's something that unifies us all. Yeah, I don't know if Dr. Baxter is listening. I'm hoping to get him on for an interview as well. So yeah, my course is for parents, but what's been happening is lactation consultants who haven't learned about tongue tie in school or in their training, which happens a lot, are watching my course and learning themselves. So I'm actually thinking about transferring that into like a teaching tool for IBCLCs so that we can educate more IBCLCs on this paradigm where I'm not sure if you have the same situation where you live, but here it's very difficult for IBCLCs who come up through hospital systems. And because there's not as much acceptance in the hospital systems, they're more tied to the Western medical model paradigm, and have only learned about very severe, very restricted anterior ties, and aren't open to hearing about posterior restrictions and the body work that goes along with that, and how it can affect the whole body. You know?
Right, Lisa, and it's true because when I was doing the research, when I was trying to film across the world, I noticed and I actually learned that pretty much we have the same situation all across the globe. Yeah. It's not just in the US, but I see the same thing happening in Australia, same thing happening in New Zealand, same thing happening in India, so pretty much same thing happening in Europe. So we are all tied on to the same medical fraternity who seem to be not really opening up to having a discussion. You know, it's important that we have a discussion, and it's important that we hear their perspective, and it's also important that they hear our perspective as well. And it's not a camp. It's we don't want to see that as a camp. We can come together as a team, and a team, like without a team you can never really have a complete optimal protocol for tongue tie release.
Right. Yeah. And that's what makes our work challenging also, right, is in the actual day-to-day work on this. For some people, they can't find a team. You know, I'm lucky to have a collaborating dentist, that's one of the best in the world, and body workers here that get it. But I'm in New York, it's New York. We have a lot of stuff here. It's not the same everywhere. Which makes it difficult. And I know it's been even more challenging where you are too.
Yes.
But I just want to get back to the film itself. There are so many wonderful professionals that I know and don't know in the film. And how did that come together for you to get people to be involved? Were people like excited to be involved, or was it all ICAP members? How did you do that?
Well, I share a relationship with all of them who speak in the film for a very long time, Lisa. From the time that I got into this field a long time ago, that's several years ago. And then we went through the process of evolution, basically, from starting out the group that I did on the Facebook, which you just read out a while ago, which is especially for professionals. There's the oral ankylofrenulate group, professional group, where only professionals are discussing about the cases that they go through every day, kind of having a support network for the professionals, because we are seeing different things from different parts of the world, and we want to know more about it, and we want to discuss if the outcome that we are seeing is it some validation that we see from another place, or we come across things that we don't make sense of, because this is a field that's still emerging, and we still are seeing things we can't make sense of sometimes clinically, and we need support from each other. And that's an ongoing conference, kind of a study group that's all the time on. Like we have about over 2,000 professionals on the group, Lisa, and I'm thinking you're there on the group as well.
I've learned so much from that group, especially in the very beginning when I was new to this topic, because I was one of those IBCLCs who came up through the hospital. and
Right.
didn't know anything about this, you know.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
So that's where I connected with most of them, and that's how you know, we nurtured our relationship. And when I thought about the film, and I wanted to go back to them and ask them if they would be if they would like to be a part of the film, they were so excited and they were so generous to be able to share. And each of the interviews that I did with them, for it was a couple of hours each, Lisa. So what I have used in the film is, say, about 5 to 7% of the entire the interviewing that I have with them. So there is a whole lot of more information that's still available with me, and I'm planning to you know, evolve that into a perhaps a proper course, an online course that can be like a study material that will be made available eventually. So I will have to cross through many other you know, logistic factors to be able to make that possible for myself, especially the editing part of it.
Yeah, but that's great. That's so interesting. And you know, you don't want that material to go to waste, because
no, not at all. Yeah,
invaluable, right, to have those sources.
It's invaluable.
I just, as I'm looking at Facebook, there's so many people signing on and watching, and everything that we talk about afterwards, I'll make sure we have the links to here, especially for the professionals that are watching. I want them to know about the group because it's a great resource. So I'll definitely post that there. Let me just look at our questions. Okay. So I would love to go into the subject of medicalization of birth and how birth interventions and its impact on feeding and biomechanics affects this topic. You know, how does that give us oral restrictions? How does that give us breastfeeding difficulty, depending on the type of birth a woman has and how she's supported before and after birth?
Right.
That's a big topic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In the sense of an assessment of a tongue tie, I think one of the most important pieces that we need to bring in is to understand the impact of birth on breastfeeding, Lisa. This is so critical, and this is the piece that most of us may not be aware of, and to know how to bring it together. If you're coming from a background of being a lactation consultant or a midwife, perhaps you can bring in some piece of it because you have an experience of it. But then most other professionals who are in a part of the team don't even have an idea of anything to do with birth having an impact on breastfeeding. And it's true that in my practice in the last decade, I can tell you that I don't have a single mother walking into, I'm talking about educated women, okay, holding good positions in life, both from a professional point of view as well as personal. They come from good families, and most of these women who come into my clinic don't even have a wee bit of an idea that birth had any impact on their breastfeeding. And that was a bit shocking for me, because this was the piece that we need to understand. And as a clinician, and I'm sure that we both share a similar understanding because you're also a midwife and you can add to it, that when you have interventions where a natural process where the baby is approximately taking about, you know, kickstarting its own labor, somewhere between 36 weeks to about 42 weeks, sometimes somewhere around that, and we're not hurrying up the process and not hastening up the process and having its own you know, spontaneity of initiating labor, that means one of the signs that the baby is ready to come out, baby is ready to be born. And that's a very critical marker, because most of the medicalization around birth is about induction, Lisa, and you're aware of this. And this is across the world, not just in India, but I think it's across the world that we see this to happen. And we're hastening up the process because we feel the maturity of the maturity of the baby is already, you know, fully grown baby at 36 weeks. You know, so by 38, somewhere around that time, they start to kind of hasten the process and want to do an induction. Never waiting beyond 40 weeks. Never waiting beyond 40 weeks, you know. So that's one of the things that we need to know, that there is an impact on the central nervous system of the baby because you're using medication. And this is sometimes not a link that's made to the families. It's not disclosed to the families. Or perhaps I would even assume that we, as a medical community, we may not even be aware that this may have an impact on the baby at all. Simply because, you know, the Western medicine or the conventional medicine that we go for looks at the body in a fragmented way. It's
Yes.
not looking at it as a single unit. So therefore,
Mhm.
that demarcation makes it more harder for us to know that birth can have an impact.
Yeah.
So on breastfeeding, and then when you do an induction, you and I know that it's a roller coaster ride after that. Very
Mhm.
often, most of these births may end up to be an instrumentation birth, like using a vacuum or a forceps, or or end
Yes,
up in an
C-section.
emergency cesarean.
Yeah.
Emergency
Yeah.
cesarean.
I
And
think the stats of 50% of
yeah,
induction for first-time babies wind up in
uh-huh.
C-section.
Right, wind up in C-section. We already have that. So when we look at this kind of a roller coaster and ends up into an emergency cesarean, the body of the baby gets into a state of shock. So does the mother's body as well. So one of the things that it changes is the delicate balance between the hormones that deal with starting the process of the colostrum into the mature milk. And most of these mothers would say, I didn't really have any milk on the first day, so my baby wasn't fed. Or they're waiting out for 3 days and they say that your milk hasn't come in. But
Right.
we know that your milk is prepared in your body somewhere in the middle of your pregnancy,
Right.
around the second trimester. And mothers are not even aware of that, Lisa.
Right.
So they'll
Right.
say, my milk hasn't come in. The
Right.
logical sense is, if the baby has to be completely dependent on the mother, would it be possible for nature to have not prepared anything ahead of time before the baby arrives?
Right. It's true.
And
I often say to women, your body built this baby. This baby grew inside of you without
yeah,
you having to think about it. Right?
yes,
You don't wake up one morning and say, "Oh, legs grow now," or feet, start wiggling. It just happens, right? The brain
yes.
develops, the whole baby develops.
Mhm.
And then we think we can't trust our bodies or our babies to know how to
Right.
feed
Yes.
because we haven't really done. I mean, I see here that so many women don't even think about breastfeeding until after. They plan to. They may take a class, they may buy a pump, but they're
Yeah.
not really associating what it's going to mean to actually feed their baby until the
Right.
baby's there.
Right.
And
And then we are bombarded with information, right, Lisa?
Yeah.
Because the way you
Right.
said that the hospital setup is such that the
Right.
protocols don't really support natural
Right.
bonding between mother and baby.
Right.
So they keep them separate. And with an emergency cesarean, you can imagine it's a major operation. It's a major
Yeah.
abdominal surgery. And that makes the mother dysfunctional. She's not available to do things that she needs to do. And
Mhm.
there is a sense of disassociation happening for her. And you can see a large majority of these mothers actually end up in having postpartum depression
Yeah. I was
because they
just
can't
going to say
feed.
that.
Yes.
It's not just about the physical, it's
Yeah.
about the emotional connection. And it's so much of it is fear-based. So much of pregnancy and birth is fear-based interventions.
Yes.
Why do we do inductions? Because we're afraid that something may happen if we don't, right?
Right.
So, and that feeds on each other, and then the baby's born, and now the mom is afraid that her body isn't going to make enough milk.
Right.
And of course, it may not because of all the, as you
Shock.
said, the stress
Yeah.
hormones are high, and that prevents the feedback that helps the letdown with the oxytocin, right?
Right. And
So, I
also
mean,
the shock,
Yeah.
shock that the body is holding because of the surgery and the
Yeah.
interventions that have
Yeah.
happened. But if you're using vacuums and forceps and such interventions, what might happen is it leaves traction patterns of the baby on the baby. There's a
Mhm.
sensory imprint there. So those can alter how the muscles really work.
Right.
Most of these babies have a held up tongue because of
Mhm.
the traction forces used during birth, Lisa.
Mhm.
So we can kind of misread those imprints to be a tongue tie, for example,
Right.
or they
Right.
could be a combination of a tongue tie and traction patterns. So we
Right.
need to know and discern, and I think critically a lactation consultant who is well educated and well informed about the assessment will be able to discern what's coming from where, and when are we actually timing of frenotomy. And that's another subject I think you would want to talk
Yeah.
about a little later, about the
Yeah.
timing of the frenotomy. So these are things that are medicalization of birth is a very, very critical part in learning about tongue ties for professionals and for parents. And that's very important to discuss.
Yeah, I do think that it's important for us to realize, to bring to the forefront that this isn't just about that little piece of frenum under the tongue. And for those people who don't know what we talk about when we say tongue tie, it's a restricted frenum, which means the piece under the tongue or under the upper lip may be too tight. Sometimes there's buccal ties in here, another controversy, meaning that it's too tight for the mouth to have normal function. So that's why we abbreviate tethered oral tissues, meaning things are too tight for good function. But it's not just about that. And identifying those tethers and releasing them doesn't always help, because even though they may look like they're tied at those places, that might not be where the restriction is actually coming from, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I know the fear that moms have that something has to be done to my baby because something's wrong. I see moms or families going either way with that. They either don't want anything done or they're rushing to get something done without going through the process of a complete evaluation. And for a breastfed baby, a complete evaluation cannot be done unless it's an IBCLC. I'll say that hands down, and I'll get controversy about that. But I think you agree with me, because what's special about an IBCLC? We're looking at the whole dyad together, and no other professional is doing that or is qualified to look at the mother's issues or the parents' issues, the baby's issues, and the issues of the feeding together. So you can't just separate them, you have to put it together. So we're in a unique position to lead that team, or to be the guidance of when what other providers need to be called in, what other kind of therapies need to be there, right? So maybe you want to talk, I mean, this is your show, so let me hear your opinion on that. What other kind of providers? You are a craniosacral therapist, which is, that brings such a great dimension to your practice. I'm sure a lot of your babies do so much better just with their body work, right?
Right. Yeah. And I find that to be a very intimate practice. And I would really see if there's a space for a lot of lactation consultants who may be listening in today to see if there's a possibility of bringing that practice within their practice. And I feel a large part of, body work can be incorporated so deeply and intimately with lactation consultancy. And I can't see them separate anymore, Lisa. Because in my practice, I noticed that most of these women have had trauma that's coming from birth, and that needs to be dealt with at different levels, not just counseling. Counseling is one level of it, looking at which an IBCLC can do, but they need a touch and a space of healing, which needs to be coming from a very subtle space, and a space that is non-verbal, like we started out talking, and craniosacral therapy, especially the biodynamic dimension, really provides that. And I'm very grateful to be able to bring that piece in. And I noticed that most of my lactation practice cannot be seen without it. So I see my 60% or 70% of my work in lactation begins and ends in craniosacral work, Lisa. So most of these are supported through the protocol, and I see a significant change that comes within the diet, both the mother and the baby, and a lot of things settle even before I decide to do a frenotomy, where there's a physical restriction going on. But one needs to discern the separate factors that are coming from birth, from various other issues that are around it, and then address that layer by layer by layer. And if the parents are aware of it, and if they're educated and you give them that piece, they are always on board with you on the plan. And I've seen great results with that, Lisa. We don't see reattachments happening, very, very little, and great outcome. Settling of the outcome of what we're looking at in terms of settling all the feeding issues around that, or many other issues that could be related. For example, reflux. For example, constant crying, or needing to be needing to be carried, for example, constantly baby needs to be carried. Those are some of the issues that can, and torticollis, for example, physical restrictions, like, functionally, your musculature is so tight that the baby cannot feed or prefers feed on one side or the other, and the mother's going through pain. So these are things that can be handled. So I think craniosacral therapy can be a significant portion, one of the body work that can be intimately incorporated.
Yeah, I do, I have somebody that's on my team who does wonderful craniosacral therapy, Dr. Jackie Hines. I'll link her connectivity physical therapy in the notes afterwards, because if you're in my area, she's a wonderful provider to know. So yeah, what I find also is that babies who've had body work seem to handle, and when I say handle, I mean both physically and emotionally, neurologically, handle the release better. Because as those of us with experience seeing babies before and after release do see there's a release of much more than that skin. It's there's a lot of tightness held there, and the body holds on to the stress there, and then it's released, and what happens then, right? Babies react differently, and I think the body work prepares the baby and prepares the dyad for that release. And I have a whole section on how what to do that night, and it's not just about technical things, it's about relaxation exercises for mom and for baby, and even dad too can participate in the relaxation and the keeping of the calm and the rest and the readjusting, right? So body work following the procedure is critical. Okay, so let me just take a quick look at the questions, because time is just going. Okay, I think that one of the really important topics is underdiagnosis or overdiagnosis. And I think we've touched on that a little bit here, but is there anything you'd want to add to that?
We have seen a significant rise in frenotomies in the last few years, Lisa, as you may be aware. In Australia alone, we see about 800% high in frenotomies in the last 2 years. And that is a big of a concern, because we are looking at, it's like, really, do we have such a big incidence? Is that true? So these are, that's one of the pieces why it makes it so controversial, right? Having said that, we don't really have an incidence report that truly shows the incidence in the population, in general population, anywhere in the world. We have a few reports that have come, and they show in Australia, I think in the UK, when Monica Hagen did the incidence report, she came up with a figure in the report about 10.75%, I think, 10%, approximately 10%. And in Brazil, we have shown 20%. So most of these reports and many other parts of the world show, say, about 2 or 3%. That's vastly different.
I wonder if there's a correlation between how many people are looking and how high the percentage is. Like, doesn't Brazil have an inspection law, so they're checking more babies?
Right, that's true. That's one of the pieces that are there. But what is also critical is, are we really looking at all different classifications of tongue tie, Lisa? Because if we are really looking at only the anterior portion of it, perhaps you're going to see a smaller number. But if you're going to include many other classifications which have not been looked at before, you're obviously going to have a larger number. That's one thing. Perhaps they didn't look for that. Maybe, for example, posterior ties were never looked at until a few years ago. So we will have to do incidence report across the world at different countries to be able to reestablish that we are looking at numbers that are, and then we need to look at the assessments, because we don't really agree on a single tool across the world to even do assessments of classifications or assessments. And there are pieces like we just discussed about the birth. So we don't have a tool that actually separates all of them neatly. We have some tools that are good, and I really love many of them. 2 or 3 I think we have, which are really good. But at the same time, it doesn't. Not everybody is looking at it, and not everybody is trained in looking at it
Right.
in terms of even using those assessment tools. So we
Mhm.
still have a lot of ground foundational education that needs to be set up.
Yeah.
And high quality education is very critical, I feel, in the
Right.
future. That's one of the reasons why the film intends to bring and mobilize funds to be able to provide that, at least in an Indian scenario, if I cannot do it anywhere else, which I'm hoping that it will, it will take its course. But at least in India, I'm looking at seeing if the film can actually bring in that kind of funds to be able to provide that education. Yes, and we started out with the tongue tie first course last year in November, Lisa, and it had a great response by a combination of different sets of people that came in. Pediatricians came, we had lactation consultants, we had dentists coming into the group. So we had a small group, but we had a very varied group, and I was very happy to have them during the course. And we will
Yeah.
have many more such coming forward.
That's great. And maybe you can branch out of India too. Make it a world.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely, I would love
what's
to.
you know, we both belong to an organization, but ICAP right now. Before that, it was IATP, and I have to just say one thing about the first. I believe it was 2013 when I went to Montreal for that meeting, and I'm a nurse, I'm a midwife, and I'm a lactation consultant. So that's 3 different types of professionals, and I've attended professional conferences on all those levels. I had never been to a conference that was interdisciplinary. And that's one thing about this field that I think it's challenging, but it's also enlightening to watch providers from different disciplines interacting, and there's not so much of a hierarchy. Those who really get it understand that a lactation counselor and a lactation consultant and the dentist and the surgeon and the body worker all have an equal part to play. And there's such interplay with that, with the learning and the research. But that part of it was what brought me. I came home and I said to my family, I found my tribe. I found, these people, and just, and it was also, it was quite an awakening experience for me to have people saying what I was finding in my own clinical practice that nobody had taught me about before. And I was here and I was like, all these people are talking about what I'm seeing and they know about it more than me. And it was wonderful. But those are some of the challenges too, because even though those of us who are involved now respect each other, not all, and I don't mean to call anyone out, but just for an example, not all dentists understand what lactation consultants do or respect us because they don't understand what we do. So if a dentist is learning about a laser and he's learning that he can do this procedure and he doesn't understand how it's related to other complications in the body and the spirit and the dynamic between the mom and the baby and milk supply, and I could go on and on. If he doesn't understand that there's someone who does understand that, he almost doesn't know what he doesn't know, right? So to me, the mission of getting this multidisciplinary message out that your film is that really hits home. So again, thank you. About the professionalism of the film, there's a way. Tell us about how you're spreading the word. So it's professionals can get a license. Can you explain that to our audience?
Yes, yeah. So yes, if you go onto the website Untying Breastfeeding, Lisa, you can actually procure the license. There's an educational license. There is the public license that you can have. These are licenses that are provided for the professional to be able to screen the film in their communities, either with their clients or general community, or in libraries, or maybe even in clinics and hospitals. This is how it's been done. So we have about 100 professions who have actually picked up the film, and they're showing it in their communities all across the world. So I'm very excited about it. because they have managed to screen it more than once, and more people are interested in seeing it because it, like I mentioned, it transcends. So they're able to kind of break those barriers and make teams within their communities through the film. And
Right.
which is the reason I would encourage more people to actually take the license. And critically important, because you're, you picked up this topic, Lisa. I do want to talk about the fact that I didn't open up the film intentionally to the general public. I haven't done that. The reason being that this is an emerging science, and most parents are looking for answers. Now, if I open this film up to the general public all across the world, that perhaps would have been an easiest way to get the funding for the film. However, it could actually lead to a little bit of a panic state, because most parents want an answer if they have an issue, and they can figure out that they can, say, oh my god, my child has this, and this is what I needed support for, and they find answers to it. They don't have the team that can support them.
Right.
Many parts of the world, Lisa. So that can lead into a panic state, and that's not what I wanted to have. What I wanted to have is a team that understands the issue, and if it is supported and the film is screened in their presence, then they know where to go, where to look for help, because they have a
Right.
team there. So I
Right.
have been mindful on that approach, and I'm hoping that more of these professionals all across, that could be dentists or lactation consultants. This is my appeal to you, that this film is made for you to take it to your communities, and I would wish for you to do that, and it will also be supportive of the project in a way, So that was the intent. Yeah.
Yeah, and don't be embarrassed to say that the more licenses are sold, the more you can recoup some of the funds that you used of your own personal funds to make this movie, because you did put yourself out there, and you deserve to get that back, and then to spread the word. And the more that
Yes.
people see it, the more traction it'll get.
Right. That's right.
I challenge my local New York people who wants to be the first person to screen Untying Breastfeeding in our area. It may have to be me, but we'll see if we can get multiple screenings of your film here. That would be very exciting.
Right. There are two professionals who are from New York who speak in the film, Kathy Gina Watson and Dr. Scott Siegel, and they both are from New York. So yeah, there you go. You can collaborate with them.
Yeah, and Dr. Siegel's been a guest on my show. We've interviewed him. So I'm gonna have to light a fire under him and get him to share this information with everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay,
He's a dear friend.
Yeah, he's a great friend. There's some parents who've made comments as we're talking here. So I just want to read, especially one. I think this is heartwarming. And hi, it's Marta. The movie is so on point. I felt absolutely heartbroken when I couldn't breastfeed my son due to his tongue tie. Nobody at the hospital where I delivered told me that my son had a tongue tie. Thanks to your diagnosis, Lisa, your instructions and support, and thanks to Dr. Siegel, who removed my son's tongue tie, I still breastfeed my son, and he's 17 months now. Thank you, ladies, for your work in helping women to breastfeed. So I think that's a great way to start to wrap up, right? I mean, it's universal. This is the story that's being told in the film, right? So I'd love to see like thumbs up and hearts and stuff like that on Facebook. If we do screen it here, who would be interested in seeing this film, right? I see some of the professionals watching are saying, I can't wait to see it. So it's really exciting. I know you're not seeing the Facebook, but you're gonna be happy when you sign off and you get to see all the great reviews that we've had here. And thank you everybody for watching. I'm just going to take a quick look through, Yasmin, and make sure there's no questions that I plan to ask you that we didn't get to. I mean, we could talk for like 4 hours if we wanted, right?
Yeah. We can keep talking, Lisa, for days.
Okay. Talked about the risk to doing it. We talked about, the birth implications. And, this is important. The risk of doing the procedure without adequate knowledge or training. So there are some providers who really have never had training other than basic medical school training, who are releasing ties without knowing what they're not, you know, they know basic surgical technique, but they don't understand the full implications in a, especially in a breastfeeding infant, right?
Yes.
I mean, you see that, you hear that a lot too.
Yeah, that's right. And
Yeah.
one of the things that you can have a risk for is to not knowing how to go about supporting a mother to be able to restore her breastfeeding.
Yes.
You see, and just releasing a tongue tie, there are some parents who come desperately after having done a release, who say this has never helped me. It's not doing anything, because maybe it was not latching and continues to not be able to latch. So this is the thing that we need to understand, that it's a very critically a team approach, and it's got to be that way. And there's no way that we can we are not individuals who can try and fix any issue. So we got to have a hand holding, supporting around these mothers and babies, because they deserve better care. And that's really important to be said at this forum. And thank you for giving me that forum to be able to say that. I've said that in the film many, many times in different ways. And all the professionals in the film are speaking about the same language. But I think we need to be loud enough for most people to hear it. It's not being heard enough, and I think more people need to hear about that, Lisa. Team approach. If we need to take it, this is what I say to most parents. I say, if we need to take 1,000 steps to restore safe experience of birth and breastfeeding, then we need to do that.
Yes. Yes. Wonderful point. So Yasmin, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's late in the evening there. I feel that if we were in a public place where people could respond, we'd be hearing a standing ovation for you. So from my heart to yours across the globe, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
It was wonderful. And I can't wait till we can be in the same room again together, you know, and give each other a hug.
Yes.
So before we sign off, you know, there will be in the comments, and I'll go back and answer some more, make sure all the links are there for you to find Untying Breastfeeding, the film. We will get screenings going for you here. I promise you. I promise. That's my promise in my gratitude to you for being here. We will get a screening here. For those of you, you know, in the beginning, I planned to introduce myself, but I went right to Yasmin because I was so excited about her. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a lactation consultant and a midwife in Staten Island, New York, and I work with an integrative functional approach to wellness care for women. So what that means, as we were talking about before, is not just fixing something, but finding the root causes and making solutions to that in a holistic way, the whole body, the whole unit. And I consider a mom and a baby to be one unit, you know? So that's what I do. And my information will be here. I do wellness events and I do breastfeeding events, and online and in person. So if you follow me, that would be great. I'm also on Instagram, and Tongue Tie Experts is the page for the breastfeeding arm of my business. And Tongue Tie Experts is also on Instagram. So if you'd like, you know, I know the younger crowd, the younger parents are all on Instagram, and I'm learning about Instagram for my own kids, how to navigate that. So we're over on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and I have a website, and Yasmin's website will be there, and her Facebook page, and if you're local to her area, how you can go to her practice website, and definitely how to get the film Untying Breastfeeding. So once again, Yasmin, thank you so much, and we will talk again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.